Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for another edition of Proof Talks with KG, GKC, and myself, JW. We have a ton of stuff to talk about and to dive into, but I think to kind of start us off, I think it'll be a good idea to ask you guys your background and your personal story, I guess, of how you became a conservative or Christian conservative, and how actually you guys became politically active. I know that a lot of our followers have asked us this in the past, kind of our history. So I thought I would ask you guys. KG, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can start us off. Yeah, so I think I wrote on my blog a little bit about this, but I myself that if you broke down statistics on your tendencies or likelihood to be conservative or liberal, I kind of check all the boxes for liberal, right? I was born to illegal immigrant mother, deadbeat father, who was black. My mom's Mexican. My dad, who raised me, I consider my father, is not my dad. He's my stepdad. Awesome Christian man who has a lot of influence on, my theology, my understanding, background. So I checked a lot of those boxes, right? For being a liberal. Grew up in the projects of Los Angeles, a couple different locations, on welfare. Eventually, my father joined the union, ILWU, which of course is very left-leaning in its tendencies as well. I think the biggest factor for me overall, being conservative, and then of course being Christian, is my faith, and then how my mom raised me in between the time where my absent father and my stepped in. She raised me with Catholic values, whether that was just honestly cleaning your room, a la Jordan Peterson, to being extremely respectful of, everyone you come across, even if they don't deserve it, up until the point that, they lose that respect. We live within our means, of course. We had to, because we didn't have the ability to splurge at all. Again, growing up in the projects, you're basically bottom of the totem pole. Outside of that is, you're on the street. So these kind of things, they stuck with me. They stuck with me, and they still stick with me today. And I think at the time, of course, you're a younger dude, all the way up and through and through high school. I'm not really thinking too much politically. I know a lot about American history, especially military, because my mom just raised me with those ideals that, hey, look, I came to this country because I wanted a better life for myself. I love this country. It's given me opportunities to raise you guys. I have a great respect and love for America. Always wanted to be a guy who joined the military. And these things didn't stick to me as something that was conservative. I just understood them as, hey, this is what Americans do and what they believe. In high school, I started to realize there's a lot of politics behind a lot of things. And I don't know if that was intentional, but I think that some of the professors, teachers that I came across were just pushing that in general. They were pushing a lot of politics on what we taught. I remember a geology teacher who literally every single day of that class, geography teacher, every day of the class, he would say, United States is about 80-20 socialism, or 80-20 capitalism / socialism in terms of its. He goes, it needs to be more like 40-60 the other way, or even more. And I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever.
What grade
I think
was
at
this?
that point, that was, I want to say 10th grade geography. I'm not sure what.
You get politics and math class in public schools, man.
Oh,
it's absurd.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you're that young, you're not realizing it. You're kind of just like, oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And you kind of just swallow it and move on. And so, man, just to see how it's affecting people today, it's undeniable. that they get you when you're young and you're not sure what to think at that point because you're so impressionable. In 11th, 12th grade, I started to understand things a little more. Again, the leading factor for me was my faith. And I went to Calvary Chapel churches here in SoCal, non-denominational Christian church. Didn't really push too heavy on Calvinism and Arminianism. It kind of just sits in the middle. Issues that if you wanted to, what's that?
Calminian.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, it sits in the middle for the most part. If you want to emphasize those things for better understanding on your own end, that's kind of how they approach the issue itself. But you know, certain pastors emphasize things a little more, but there's that little freedom in that church group. So they had a lot of influence on, again, my thinking and my faith. And then in college, I did a little round of exploring with a lot of liberal groups. Again, at this time, I don't even know that they're pushing a certain agenda. I just know that it was a good thing, so to speak, to be involved in policy and politics. So I joined the Associated Student Organization of my junior college. We tagged along with a couple groups, nonprofits that wanted to help get junior colleges more funding. And they started letter writing campaigns, meeting with state senators, things like that. Stuff that I thought was pretty awesome. And I still do think it's pretty awesome to have that kind of effect and influence. Lo and behold, I didn't have no idea they were completely like hardcore Marxist, socialist kind of deals. We end up, at some point, end up campaigning for the mayor of LA, Villaraigosa, and the teachers union was back the whole effort. I literally at a computer calling people and listening to the conversations behind me was actual teachers talking about the values of Marxism. And I kind of just sat there like, this is not exactly what I had in mind when I joined up with this nonprofit group.
Yeah.
It was with Dolores Huerta Institute was backing that group. So that's actually on my resume. It's kind of funny because I think it was a great experience. I just had no idea what their foundation was.
Yeah.
So I started getting more interested at that point. When I joined, I transferred to UCLA. Had a lot of influence from my fraternity brothers. A good friend of mine, Charlie, turned me on to Dennis Prager, and I had been listening to him ever since 2009. Huge influence on, I think now today, because he helped me understand that my understanding from my childhood was that I was a conservative and that I just had no idea how to, I guess you would say, carry those things. I always point out again that in 2008, I voted for Obama. It's my first presidential election, basically just for the hype. You know, he sounds articulate. The fact that he was black wasn't a deal to me, but it was a big deal to my parents, and I thought that was pretty cool. But again, I wasn't looking at the policies behind the guy. It was more of the nice speeches he made. Once I started, around that time, I started looking at the policies. I started looking at what they said about Bush, about McCain, and I really started changing things in terms of my thinking because I realized my conservative upbringing and background and philosophy did not match my voting record, even though it was, that short. So I really started diving in. I knew a ton about American history, and I loved it. I realized none of the stuff that the liberals and Democrats were preaching about matched up with what my understanding was. So that was kind of like my turnaround at that point. Even before that, I got into a lot of debates online. Kind of just like how we got into our group where we met each other. I did that almost all the time. And I shared a lot of news articles to the point where when I took little leaves of absence from social media, people were like, no, where am I going to get my news from? And that influenced the idea of me creating the blog on Facebook, just so there was a location I could put it to, even when I didn't want to put it on my own page. I wasn't afraid at that point of losing friends or anything. It was more of, I just don't want to inundate them with stuff they don't have to look at, because half the time when I go through my feed, it's kind of like, this is on stuff I don't really care about from other people. I like the fact that it's a personal sharing site, right? You can talk about personal things, but 90% it's all politics and sports anyway. But now I'm at the point where there's so much nonsense on social media feeds from your friends that I just basically push everything from Proof Log to my personal feed, just so people can have a different opinion. That's why I've never deleted anyone. They make me absolutely insane. I never delete them, because I believe that at the very least they might see two things: one, a differing opinion on political issues, and two, a Christian understanding and worldview, and hopefully Jesus in the way I interact. And I'm working on that one a lot. So
we all
I'll
are.
cut it off there because I could keep going. Right.
What about you, GKC?
Well, gosh, I guess I'll start at the beginning. I was born on May 29th, 1874, in a suburb of London. It's called Kensington, curiously without a British accent. Yeah, hey, I'm a little bit the opposite of Kenny in a few, but not always. I was born into a number of the boxes that you would expect someone to be conservative. I was raised in a Christian home. The house generally had conservative values, for the most part. And, you want to be open-minded when you're young. So I think coming through high school, especially, it was really shocking to me to see just one opinion represented among the teachers at a public school and constantly shoved down throats. The first day of my first class of high school, a high school at which I knew one person, two people, didn't have classes with any of them. I didn't come from the feeder schools, right? First period, first class, my geography teacher says, raise your hand if you're a Christian. So I got to be the only person raising my hand that day.
Wow.
Which was interesting. But going through high school, it really cemented a lot of the things I had a predisposition to believe, because nobody else was out here defending these things. The teachers were all shoving one viewpoint, the kids were all parroting, and I kept stepping back and saying, well, wait a minute. I was taught to think critically. My grandfather taught me the Socratic method, and I don't see this. Facts should be important to the discussion, and I'm seeing a lot of people on the other side who are supposed to be open-minded, just as the most closed-off people I've ever seen. I remember certain debates, in those early years where people, I would argue someone into a proverbial corner, and they just cover their ears and go, la, 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 which was really distressing to me. And I know you can see that on both sides at times.
Yeah.
But man, it was pervasive. I think it was only cemented further when I was in later years kind of starting to just question some things and revisit foundational beliefs. I've gone through a few periods of that in my life. When Obama was president, I remember thinking, okay, you know what? I'm listening to this guy with an open mind. If the things that he says are true, I'm on board. And I watched very carefully over the next couple of years where he proved beyond a shadow of doubt that he was lying, and that this ideology just is destructive. I don't know. It's like the Bible says, you'll know them by their fruits, right? And all these cities decrying institutional racism and poverty and violence, with high rates of minority poverty and minority incarceration, are all run by Democrats. and have been for decades. You know,
Yeah.
so I think I was taught a bit when I was young, and more and more I just look out at the world, and I can't find anything else that makes sense of it all outside of a Christian worldview and conservative values.
All right.
I
I
think
guess it's
one of your fellow Brits. Ever that?
Well, we try to keep a stiff upper lip,
oh
so
yes.
we'll fight you on the beaches, on the island, in the
Oh,
streets,
oh,
and you know the thing.
saying I think one of
yeah,
your
the
fellow.
thing.
Oh man, there it is.
Absolutely.
Can we sell a shirt that says "You know the thing"?
Actually, that's a good idea.
Let's do
I
that.
like that actually.
Yes,
I
That's
like
please.
that.
happening.
Down.
I also
Yeah.
just like to say I have my picture this way. I'm putting the Chesterton back in chest. Wait,
Putting the chest back in Chesterton.
yeah, that's the one.
Nice.
That
There we
was the
go.
one.
There we go.
One of those.
I guess I'll go with me next. I guess because I'm the last one remaining. I have a very similar upbringing to you, GKC.
The England thing.
The England thing, yes, in the 1800s. that's but yeah, I mean, I was brought up in a Christian conservative home, but I never really understood why I was conservative, though. I had my beliefs, but I never really understood or knew the core reasons why I believed what I believed. And in the Canadian context, a Canadian conservative is probably a Democrat, probably a moderate Democrat. A Canadian conservative would never challenge universal health care. It would never challenge a lot of socialist policies that are already in place in Canada. That's just something that Canadian conservatives don't do. And so I was in that camp. I would never, ever set a second or question Medicare for all or free healthcare up in here in Canada. So high school, I've always been politically active. In middle school, I always knew George Bush. I always knew all those people. I always had a passion for politics since I was a kid. But I was again, I was never. I never really understood why I believed what I believed. So flash forward in high school, I had a lot of liberal teachers. The school I went to in high school is an art school, so you would think that everyone is left wing, and in fact, everyone was left wing. And so I was inundated with leftist thought and ideology in high school, but I was still what I thought was a conservative, even though it was just pretty much a moderate Democrat. So then, believe it or not, university actually cemented me as a conservative, like a true conservative, limited government, really pretty much what you would call a Tea Partier. And it's a strange story because usually it goes the other way. Usually conservatives go into university and it's all of a sudden, and like the university I went to was York University, and it's in Toronto, and it's known as a very leftist school. It's if I remember correctly, it's known for a certain aspect of socialism. They maybe not invented, but they created or specialized in a certain socialist thought. And so that's the political science department, which I have a undergrad in political science. So I mean, in school, my professors would be teaching leftist thought. Believe it or not, I never had a bad professor when it comes to you're getting an F or you're getting a failure if you don't spew or if you don't regurgitate what I'm spewing to you, which is good. But in that time, I mean, I used to be pro-European Union, but after a couple of European Union classes, I became one of the most anti-European Union person or students in the class, and there was a couple of us, and so it was actually it's pretty amazing to see. But yeah, it's university, and my political hero is definitely Ben Shapiro. The guy I watched him on Piers Morgan when I was a kid, all those years ago when he tackled the Second Amendment debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I followed him since then, and I remember his. I think it was him maybe a year after that. I think he was on CNN, and he